Welcome to our continuing virtual voices. Thank you for your letters and comments. We appreciate them and answer them as possible. Um, I wanted to mention that uh, since 1987, after Chernobyl, WIT has been focusing on three themes: nuclear energy, environment, and human health. And that is why we feel that it's very important to continue on this theme because of our problem with energy. We also wanted to mention to you that since we have been losing and increasing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere every single year, and in the past 50 years, more than 60% of our animal species has disappeared due to human invasion and action due to overpopulation. And with those comments, I just wanted to introduce to you Ms. Kateryna Pavlova, who is the head of the International Cooperation and Public Relations Department of the State Agency of Ukraine on the exclusion zone management. That is Chernobyl, where formerly the Chernobyl was. She is also a researcher of the K1 project at the Center for Nuclear Studies at Columbia University. Also, we have Ms. Nusrat Lasker, and Nusrat is a consulting analyst at Accenture in the UK. She holds a master's degree in management with specialization in strategy and international business from the London School of Economics and a bachelor's degree in international relations from the University of Edinburgh. So, Mrs. Pavlova, over to you.
Dear colleagues, dear auditory, thank you so much, Dr. Durbak, to invite me for this webinar. We all the time speak about very important topics in your webinar, and it's very important initiative you're doing during your webinars. Nuclear energy is a reliable, clean, and predictable source of electricity, which today is ready to meet the needs of world economic, environment, and national security. Despite the fact that today is not considered an ideal time for the development of the level of nuclear energy, a new wave of innovation in the way which is going to completely transform the energy sector. Innovation move nuclear energy a new trajectory. Innovation open a new era of nuclear energy. In addition to improve economy efficiently and the flexibility, advanced technologies can open new market to meet the growing demand of heat and hydrogen and even medical isotope. That is why the universe work every day to support industry and inventors in development and demonstrate technologies that change and improve technological solutions in the nuclear field. This improved efforts will guide humanity in the future with new solutions and new approach such as new class of advanced reactors. The United States is developing advanced new reactor designs that have unprecedented versatility, can be combined with renewable energy source, much cheaper, and burn waste as an energy source. A striking example is advanced small module reactor, new sail power. It is cooling system safe and advanced systems that essentially makes the reactor safe without any action required by the operator to shut down the reactor. The project is currently being considered by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and it is scheduled to become new world first advanced commercial by 2026. It is also one of the best opportunities to compete in emerging market in the world with countries such as China, Russia, and South Korea. The US Department of Energy has provided 40 million in financial support to help keep the new cell project afloat and ensure that America became a world leader in implementing these types of reactor in the world market. Subversive innovation do not stop an advanced reactor design. We are radically change the way this technology are created through improved production. For example, BWX Technologies and Oak Ridge National Laboratory are currently implement a project to develop various nuclear components through manufacturing a process known like 3D printer. As a new improved reactor appear on the grid, new fuels are being developed that can operate more efficiently and at high temperature. X Energy has already applied for a license to produce TRISO-X fuel, accident carrying fuel. Finally, Global Nuclear Fuel, General Electric, Framatome, and Westinghouse are working to help bring new accident-resistant fuel to market over the next 10 years. These new technologies will future enhance the safety and efficiency of nuclear fuel for the current reactor fleet. Global Nuclear Fuel is currently testing two versions of its materials in a Georgia reactor. They placed lead test units with fuel last year. When we look to Middle East, also the way of open world of nuclear with new technology. Several Arab countries have already begun the process of acquiring nuclear power plant. The United Emirates has already launched the first nuclear power plant, power of 5,600 megawatt, Barakah. Plant is being jointly developed by Emirates Nuclear Energy Corporation and Korea Electric Power Corporation, called KEPCO. Saudi Arabia also has planned to make history in the peaceful use of nuclear power and has discussed options with companies from South Korea, Russia, and others. Saudi Arabia even hired a French company to conduct site assessment last year to build a nuclear power plant. Some people argument that nuclear power is not needed in a region rich of oil and sun, but these estimates are not accurate. The oil will run out. Saudi Arabia has large oil source than any other Middle East country, and this oil is accepted to run out something like about 70 years. Currently, Saudi Arabia generated just under 40% of its electricity by burning oil. This is a waste of the economic source, and burning oil for electricity it is also horribly unfriendly to environment. Many of the Middle East countries are also implementing plans for renewable energy, but this kind of power cannot the growing cities run the desalination plant at night or keep the massive air conditioner running through the desert summer. Simply put, solar and wind power are not efficient enough to provide enough power, and there is no effective way to store power for use when the sun doesn't shine or the wind doesn't blow. Unless and until solar and wind technology and batteries improve cardinally, they can only serve as supplement fuels. So I would like to discuss and ask Nusrat, which is her point of view about nearest and perspective future. We can see that United Emirates Emirates is successfully implement and build nuclear power plant with Korea KEPCO. So new technology is coming on our world, and maybe it is time to start thinking to don't burn 40% of oil to manage the electricity for Saudi Arabia, and maybe it is time to think to provide new technology of nuclear in Saudi Arabia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, before I begin, I would like to thank Dr. Durbach for hosting this webinar and giving all of us a fantastic opportunity to learn and discuss about the exciting future of nuclear energy in the Middle East. And I would like to especially thank Ms. Kateryna Pavlova for sharing her knowledge and expertise in this field. You inspire me so much, and I'm very honored to be sharing this platform with you today. To the audience here, as Dr. Durbach has already given my background, I'm currently working as a consulting analyst in Accenture, and one of my first projects happens to be within the nuclear industry, which is why I was very interested in participating in this webinar when I found out that we are going to be discussing this very interesting issue. To answer your question, Ms. Kateryna, about the future of nuclear energy in the Middle East, I would like to touch upon a few points on sustainability and what implications does nuclear energy have in the Middle East region. So, as you said before, right, what makes nuclear energy interesting in the context of Middle East? It is the fact that these oil-rich economies have recently begun to recognize the importance of and prioritize sustainable forms of energy. Proponents of nuclear energy, they strongly believe that it is one of the most sustainable forms of energy, especially in the context of Middle East. I'm not suggesting that nuclear energy is free from challenges. Of course, just like any form of resource, nuclear energy has its own pros and cons, and depending on the regional context, nuclear energy may present its own set of opportunities and challenges. But now let's look into why nuclear energy is better than other forms of energy in the Middle East region, and why we need more nuclear reactors, specifically small modular reactors in countries like the UAE and Saudi Arabia. So point number one is that anyone who has a basic understanding of what nuclear energy has to offer to us is that nuclear energy is essentially a zero emission clean energy source. It is often referred to as clean energy because it does not produce carbon dioxide. Now, people will say that, okay, but then there are other forms of renewable energy that also do not produce carbon dioxide. There is solar energy, wind energy. What makes nuclear power plants better than those other options? My argument would be that nuclear power plants, they operate at a much higher capacity factor than renewable energy sources. To define what a capacity factor means, capacity factor is a measure of what percentage of the time a power plant actually produces energy. And this is a problem for all intermittent energy sources. As Ms. Kateryna Pavlova discussed earlier, that the sun will not always be shining or the wind is not always blowing. So what do you do at that point? So this makes nuclear energy a better option. Now, second point, nuclear energy is a better option than other sources of energy because its land footprint is small. By land footprint, I mean that nuclear energy produces more electricity on less land than any other clean air source of energy. To give you an example, a typical traditional nuclear reactor, a typical like 1,000 megawatt nuclear facility takes up about 1 square mile to operate. But wind farms, in comparison, they require 360 times more land to produce the same amount of electricity. And solar plants, they require 75 times more space. So you see, nuclear plants, they require less space for producing the same amount of electricity, which means if you go for small modular reactors, they will require even lesser space. And this is particularly relevant from a Middle Eastern perspective, because if you look at countries like the UAE, they are very small countries in terms of the land space that is available to them. So it makes a lot of sense that these countries, if they are venturing into nuclear energy, they opt for small modular reactors because it is going to take up less space. And the final point that I would like to make is that nuclear energy produces minimal waste. Okay, so now we all know that one of the main concerns for nuclear energy is the radioactive waste management. This radioactive waste is very dangerous, and one of the main challenges countries face is how they would like to manage the disposal of that radioactive waste that is produced. They want to be able to manage it and dispose that waste in the safest manner possible. But in reality, although the radioactive waste is dangerous, the amount of waste that is produced from nuclear energy is actually quite less. The reason being that nuclear energy, when compared to other sources of energy, is extremely dense. It is about 1 million times denser than other traditional energy sources. And because of that, the amount of waste that is produced is not as big as you think. Then this makes an even stronger case for why we would want small modular reactors, because if a traditional nuclear reactor is producing minimal waste, then a small modular reactor produces even lesser waste, and it makes it even better to manage it for the governments and regulators. So I would think these 3 points are important to keep in mind for the countries in Middle East going forward. And of course, looking at the pros that we have discussed now, there are so many reasons why we must be going for nuclear energy. These countries, they also need to keep in mind that they have the appropriate regulations in place. They are abiding by the international law. And if everything is in good place, I think the future of nuclear energy in the Middle East is very bright. Thank you.
Well, Kateryna and Nusrat, thank you very much for very, very interesting, informative lectures. Gives us a lot of new information. And I noticed that we have Dr. Bernard Goldstein with us, who's on our board. And I'm going to ask whether he would like to have any comments before we turn into questions. I'm so glad that you were able to bring all these points into perspective, because that's one of the concerns, not only, as you mentioned, the land use and the disposal, but and how, to what extent we do not need to worry about the environmental and the medical factors where we use small nuclear power plants. But the fact that it is basically, since they are produced by the governments, all people benefit from them, rather than solar, wind, or whatever energy we produce, that basically the public has to pay for it, and it is, the benefits are only for the people that produce them. So I think that that's a very important perspective, since there's going to be a tremendous amount more of energy need as our population keeps on growing and more people get their computers and are able to communicate throughout the world. So that is such a very important factor. And I see that Dr. Goldstein is still muted, so he cannot hear what I'm saying. Bernie, I asked you to ask whether you have any questions or any comments following Kateryna or Nusrat's presentation.
Yes, I do. And first, they were superb presentations. First, superb presentations, really thoughtful presentations, and presentations that I think were particularly pertinent because they made it clear that when you talk globally, you lose sight of the fact that local issues predominate. And the local issues can be geographical, they can be political, they can be many different types, but certainly they do predominate. the idea of, for Nusrat, it has to do with the distance factors. I mean, one reason that one does not put one reason that solar does not work as well if you put it in the middle of the desert is that no one lives nearby or uses that electricity, and you still have to transmit the electricity generated. And have you looked to compare that issue of whether it be solar or wind, being in a nice windy place, but far from anywhere anyone lives, in terms of the loss through transmission lines of electricity, as compared to nuclear in a small compact area near, relatively near where people live. And then, of course, the counter argument is, well, what if the nuclear, something bad happens like Chernobyl, and it's near where people live, that won't be very good. So I'd appreciate hearing both comment on the transmission issues.
Well, and I just would like to bring up the point that keep in mind that both Chernobyl and Fukushima were a result as human errors.
Yes.
Not that there was something wrong with the reactors, but if you do something stupid and it causes an explosion, it's not the part. In other words, if you do not put the right kind of fuel in your furnace and suddenly the furnace explodes, it's not the fact that's the problem with the furnace, it's a problem what you put in it. So I think that that is a very important factor, and that also is an important factor related to the health of the people and what the government does. We know that in Chernobyl, after it happened, the government completely denied that anything happened. And until Sweden announced that there was something wrong, everybody, if it only happened there and it didn't have ramifications, they went all the way to San Francisco with the nuclear cloud, but most of the people wouldn't have known that. So basically, I think the importance of people understanding that what happened with the accident had to do with people and their own inability to control what was happening, or experiments like in Chernobyl, and then you do not have the facts to be able to determine which energy is going to be important. Because keep in mind, when nuclear energy first was postulated, it was in order to provide energy for the whole world. The original builders of nuclear energy thought about that as a solution to the problem of how to have energy throughout the world. So go on, Kateryna.
Yeah. I actually, it's very important issue is mentioned now, and from a point of view, like I'm a power engineer, and I can actually explain a lot about mentioning points. First of all, in Chernobyl was type of reactor RBMK. It is a danger type of reactor, and it is a human mistake. It's compare. And it is tragedy came because of mistake of not just humanity, it is mistake of SSSR. So when we speak about Fukushima, also it's big tragedy, but before, 2 years before of accident, IAEA safeguards make some report where they advise to change cooling and extra electricity supply up from basement to the roof, and they didn't make this. So
Kateryna, one moment. Please explain. IAEA is the International Atomic Energy Association, because people that do not know, please.
World Atomic Energy Association. It is a big association where all countries who have atomic energy, who use atom, is participate like part of this world society. And every year safeguards, visiting all facilities all over around the world, all power plants, and make sure that everything is safe. But system of work like this, IEA cannot say for government, you should do these rules, follow these rules, or you should do this and this. They can advise. So report from IEA for Fukushima 2 years before of accident advised to make this change of electricity extra cooling change of placement, and they didn't do it. So it's also a mistake of humanity. If they do, even water is came in basement, it will work out, and external shutdown system work normally in reactor. So also I want to mention about waste. Yes, we know that radioactive waste from using of nuclear energy, it's a big issue and very dangerous sphere. But we never speak about waste of alternative energy source, because this issue is opened. This question is opened. What we do with solar panels when a time of its use is run out? And nuclear reactor, we can use 40, 50 years. And all these solar panels, it's up till 15 years, not more. And we already have first big amount of old solar panels, which is produced from very dangerous components, and we don't know what to do with this. This actually big amount of hazard waste we have now, and we don't know what to do with this. So
could you, Kateryna, could you also, and I know that you're aware of that, could you talk about the effect of the solar panels on the land, agricultural land?
Yes, it is not yet official pointed in the World Association of Energy, but I know the German Institute of Environment already start big project to learn how solar panels is impact to the soil and environment. And it is mentioned that in this ground where it stays solar panels, it's never grow against the plants, it is don't live flora, fauna, and it is change of biological substance of soil and ground. So we kill the territory where stay the solar panels. Of course, when it's roof or some buildings, it's one way. But when we put these solar panels on ground and soil, which we maybe can use for agriculture, then it's not renewable energy, sorry. It is a type of environment disaster. This is my point of view.
Oh, thank you very much. I think that every point that you mentioned was very good. Now I have Nusrat. Would you like to respond to any of Kateryna's or elaborate on any of the Kateryna's points?
I wanted to touch upon the point of the issue of human error when it comes to industrial accidents. And if I understand correctly, at least in the research that I have done and the things that I have read about the nuclear industry so far, again, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm of the understanding that, of course, any industrial accident has a huge impact on the environment, but it has been seen in studies that even when for example, the new accident at a nuclear plant, right? The impact that it has, it is big, but it is still less than the impact, for example, any other industrial accident would have. For example, an industrial factory that is producing some kind of chemical. So the impact is huge, but it all boils down to how we manage it. And prevention is better than cure, as they say. So just because anything is prone to an accident, that does not mean that we are not going to go for it. We need to fix the underlying cause, which was the human error. So we need to train the people appropriately. We need to make sure that people who will be managing those, they are trained in safety management and how to make sure that these things do not happen in the future. And then we also need full transparency, because nuclear reactors, as you mentioned earlier, they are under the control of the government. So we need to make sure that it's taking place it is functioning in a transparent manner, and there is no corruption, and the government makes sure that everything takes place. It is like there's a transparent dialogue that takes place between the government and the public, so people know that this is what is taking place, these are the risks they may have. And it's all about like policy making and making sure that there is open dialogue between the government and the public, so then we can make sure that such things do not take place in the future. And countries like the Middle East, who are newly venturing into nuclear energy, one of the most important things that they will need to keep in mind is that the people who will be managing those nuclear plants, starting from the construction to running the operations, they are properly trained in all the processes so that we can avoid any future disasters.
Thank you, Nusrat. That was an excellent perspective, and thank you. And Bernie, Dr. Goldstein, are you,
Yes, ma'am.
are you
I'm
on?
here and
Wonderful,
listening.
terrific. Could you be so kind and comment on this, and maybe you can bring in some of the research that you had on fracking?
I'd, for instance, love to see in either Ukraine or Middle Eastern countries, the kind of surveys about how individuals feel. What do the citizens feel about the risks of nuclear versus the risks of solar? I suspect that it's a worldwide phenomenon that people will feel that nuclear is far more risky and demand more of in terms of prevention and the kind of very good things that Nusrat spoke about. Let me just say though, from a public health point of view, and I come from a public health point of view, I wear one hat, that of a scientist who says that, come on, nuclear is really not a problem compared to all these others, or compared to itself. It really is, we've overestimated the risk issues. But on the other hat that I wear as a public health person is to say that no matter how hard you work on all of the good things that we're spoken about, of making sure that the workers know what they're doing, that we're all safety conscious, that we work as preventively as we can, accidents will happen. And we don't even call them accidents if we're careful. We call them incidents because they are, as Dr. Dorbach pointed out, they are due to human error. They're incidents, not accidents, but they will occur. And of course, the Fukushima defenses of the folks there is that it really wasn't an accident. It was an incident because of a tsunami, and it overcame their defenses. One can argue about whether that's true or not, that whether they should have done a better job of planning for just what happened. But the issue is that we in public health expect there to be problems, and we always design to avoid them, but we just know that humans make mistakes. It's just part of who we are. And again, designing so as to make sure that not only do we the primary prevention of preventing the mistakes in the first place, but that we do the secondary prevention of being able to protect public health, the environment, our economy, if something bad occurs, is something that we haven't done a good job with nuclear. I think we've done a good job on the primary prevention. Not a perfect job.
So what you're saying basically is that the human understanding and the political pressures from desperate interests need to be resolved in order to be able to resolve the energy problem.
Well, it's desperate interest, but it's also human fear. I mean, we're afraid of the unknown. You know, you go to a place like Texas, and where they brought up with oil fields all around them, and That was natural. Or in California, you see the little pumpers all over the place in your neighborhoods. Well, what's the big deal? In southwestern Pennsylvania, you put up something to build shell, and it's a new frightening thing. And all of the science we've done on risk science and understanding how people comprehend a risk suggests that the two major factors are to what extent this is new and strange and different than what we're accustomed to. And the second major factor is, do we trust the source of information? And I think what we're seeing worldwide is a general lack of trust of either industry or government on these kind of issues. And nuclear, my goodness, that's what atom bombs are made of. Oh my goodness, we've gotten so frightened of that. So we have to deal with those core issues. Part of it's better education. But then again, we have lots of educated people who are scared stiff of nuclear and who are campaigning against nuclear and who are campaigning against vaccination, for that matter, as Dr. Durbach put together a very good conference on.
Well, thank you, Bernie. Nusrat, I suppose that you would be the best one to answer that. And then I have a whole bunch of questions from the audience. But Nusrat, would you like to answer
Yes.
the question? Because I'm sure that you researched that.
Yes. Thank you for your question, Dr. Goldstein. You have made some very interesting and relevant points about this issue. And yes, I agree that, for example, a country like Saudi Arabia, they have lots of empty space, barren lands for setting up a nuclear power plant. But there is this issue of transmitting the energy to areas that are populated by people. And this is going to be one of the challenges. And I personally think that when it comes to a national issue, such as nuclear energy, there are so many moving parts to it. Like, there are so many factors one needs to consider. There's the whole issue of transmission, space, radioactive waste, future risks, mitigating any incidents, as you said. So it all boils down to what that particular government is prioritizing at that moment. And there will always be pros and cons. And it is ultimately about weighing those pros and cons and seeing whether if the risks associated with implementing such form of energy, do they outweigh the benefits, or the benefits outweigh the risks? And it will always be context dependent. But I 100% agree with you that this point is always definitely worth considering and gives all of us food for thought about how it may play out in a situation as in the context of Saudi Arabia.
Thank you.
Well, the interesting point of risk, how they mitigate the benefits, is a very interesting. I suppose we could have the entire session on that one. But let's move on. Kateryna, do you have any points on that? And there is
Yes.
a bunch of questions that also asks, what do you feel about the film from HBO on Chernobyl? I remember the first film that they presented, which was that nuclear energy produced the Chernobyl heart. I thought it was horrendous film that had nothing to do with reality. It's like saying that the formation of children had to do with nuclear energy and radiation, and the alcohol syndrome had to do with nuclear energy. So that was just a lot of, I don't know what it was, but they certainly got people excited about it. So the current film, which I know that you had something to do with, Kateryna, could you answer that question?
The current film is, I think it is the best version about history by now and created. And HBO actually, they trying to catch connection with our agency from long time ago to came and film few days this movie. And actually, when I came to an agency in 2016, I received a letter from HBO, and we have big bureaucracy in Ukraine. And when it came just some email letter, sometimes it's just staying somewhere and never answer it. So I was first head of international department who answered to HBO and invite them to visit the exclusion zone, and they immediately arrive. They film 3 days in exclusion zone, and the rest of movie, of course, were created in Ignalina in Lithuania. So the story of HBO, I like the type of movie, and I like the way they prefer this to audience. And I think this is the best version of history of Chernobyl ever been. So I know that Russia's side is very angry on this movie, and we can understand why, because in this movie a lot of true, really a lot of true. And I think maybe it will be one version, and maybe it should be something more opened of KGB files. So when we will know KGB files about this history, then we will see exactly the time and exactly of way of decision of SSSR in this time. I also want to mention about Saudi Arabia and perspective of nuclear energy as further. Shortly, I want just people understand that small modular reactor, it is another type of reactor. And this kind of reactor can be capacity from 30 megawatt till 300 megawatt. So it is not so powerful reactors like we have in Ukraine or in Korea or in the US now. Because other kind of reactors, they have capacity 1,000 megawatt. It is really huge, and it's somehow can be danger. But when we speak about new technology, new market of reactors, small modular reactors, it is not danger at all. It is can make disaster or impact just in area where it is. It is not spread more than its area it's located. So I think Saudi Arabia can start from small modular reactor, like new way of, new type of technology of nuclear implemented in this area. Think.
Kateryna, could you be so kind and just explain the reason why the RBMK reactors that's in Chernobyl and in the different parts of Russia were so dangerous? Particularly the RBMK reactors, rather than, for example, the water reactors that they have in France.
RBMK reactor, first of all, it's dangerous because it's a lot of radioactive waste inside. So when it's for explosion, then it's a lot of materials, radioactive materials was spraying all over. Also, RBMK reactor, all the time from start of creation, they had problem with cooling. So when it's high temperature growing, the cooling system not work enough to shut down reactor. And this red point, red lock were used in emergency type of using reactor. Unfortunately, in time when it's so high pressure inside of reactor, it's not work. It's like you press stop, but it's not stop. So this is the biggest technical bad decision ever been created. And that's why RBMK reactor, it's not built more. And in Ukraine, we had just RBMK reactor in Chernobyl, and implementing of agreement with the European Commission. In 2000, we shut down all 3 Chernobyl reactors.
Thank you. And before we move on, I have one more question. I think that as far as I'm aware, the KGB files are closed, so it will be very difficult to open them up to actually see what actually happened.
KGB file?
Yes.
I think we already have book, and I will send the link, share the link with you and with your colleagues, where some of KGB file is open. And we have this book created by Ukrainian some very high-level people. And I will share with you link of internet book. It was presented something like 2 months ago.
Oh, thank you very much. Now, one of the questions that I keep getting is, to what extent will we mitigate the problem of energy with global warming? So, Nusrat, would you like to answer that question?
So global warming, as we all know, has been a very important topic in the past few years, especially with people's recent awareness and consciousness about climate change issues. And one of the main things that comes up is that in terms of slowing down, or in fact reversing the climate change, one of the main things that comes up is that energy. How can we use energy for slowing down or even reversing climate change that is taking place right now? And I think one of the best ways for the world, the different countries in the world, to combat the issue of global warming is to start investing in more renewable forms of energy, and which a lot of countries are already doing. If you look at the developed countries like Europe, Northern America, they are already way farther ahead than their counterparts in the Far East. And if you were to think about Middle East, they are somewhere in the middle of development. So they are just beginning to recognize the potential of using renewable energies and contributing their bit in slowing down the process of climate change. So definitely, renewable energy is going to play a huge role in this process, but then it is all going to come down to us making a decision about what type of renewable energy we want to use, which type of renewable energy will be more efficient. Maybe one form of renewable energy will work well in a country like America, but that form of renewable energy may not necessarily be effective in a place, say, in South Asia, such as India. So it is all going to depend on what resources that country has available, how their economy is like, what are the geopolitical conditions of that country when it comes to decision making regarding what kind of renewable energy government might want to opt for.
Thank you, Nusrat. That was very helpful. Kateryna, any points on that?
I want to point also very important point of view that some countries and some people say that hydro energy, it is clean energy and it is alternative energy. Hydro energy power plant, when it's electricity came from water, you know. I won't mention that it's not alternative energy in future. In 2025, we will have already mentioned the amount of water source, and keep in mind to keep water sources safe. So Hydra energy, it's not alternative energy. I want that everybody hear now about this, because now it's a lot of, stories that hydra energy, it's alternative energy. It's not. Because in future, we will pay for 1 barrel of water more than for 1 barrel of oil. So also about alternative energy source, of course, I do appreciate like engineers that this is something we can use in the world, like second type of energy. But first type of energy in humanity, it is nuclear power. Without nuclear power, we cannot exist. Without nuclear power, we cannot catch the space. So this is my point of view about alternative energy.
Well, the destruction of the water table, we already know of the problems. I think it's just not mentioned. And that is true. I think it's one of the things that Dr. Goldstein was pointing out, that the public has to be informed, and the public is not informed. I know that we're too small to inform the world, but certainly we can start. Bernie, Dr. Goldstein, do you have any comments?
Oh, I think that this has been covered very, very well, and we'll really thank the presenters. It's superb. And Dr. Dvorak, as always, you've led it in a way that gotten to the key questions.
No, I actually was not as I was asking you for a comment about the destruction of the water table.
Well, that clearly is something that no one likes. And we've had a lot of that occurring, and a lot of it occurring for all sorts of ways. But again, the water table issue gets to be more of a concern for nuclear, just on the political and social issues. We have in the United States a very controversial issue of storage of nuclear waste in a site in the state of Nevada that the National Academy of Sciences has asked to weigh in on it. But the charge given to the National Academy of Science was to think in terms of what will happen 100,000 years from now. Will the nuclear waste get out? Well, that's a ridiculous charge. I mean, the idea that we have to plan for 100,000 years from now, I think just 100 years from now, people will be laughing at us for having made those type of plans. I mean, nuclear risk from the waste in water is risk that people are concerned about in terms of cancer. That's what people care about nuclear. And the word is very frightening. Again, magnetic resonance imaging, which I suspect some of us at least have had at one point or another as a technique, was actually the original name for it was nuclear magnetic resonance, which basically is a better description. But they very smartly got rid of the word nuclear originally, because if they tried to get people to use nuclear magnetic resonance, there would be a tremendous opposition to it. We have to realize that we've set up these really impractical standards for nuclear. The paper I wrote that I think I shared with Dr. Dvorak, a small paper, was basically arguing, it was more of a blog, was basically arguing that the waste seepage for the nuclear waste place in Nevada will at the earliest get to the surface if all things bad happens, if all our estimates are wrong and it moves through the land much more quickly than we thought, it will get to the surface where people live at the earliest 100 years from now. Well, the amount of deaths due to the global climate change that will occur in the next 100 years, because if we got rid of nuclear, would be enormous in comparison to the potential cancer case 100 years from now in a population of 10,000, as opposed to global climate change affecting a population of now what, almost 8 billion people?
Yes.
I mean, it's simply not a comparable thing, but yet we've locked ourselves into that type of thinking about nuclear, which we have to get out of, but we're going to be able to take advantage of it.
Thank you. I think that is an extremely important point, that we basically allow the political pressure and the pressure of various parts of industry to affect our thinking process of what is possible, what is necessary, and what we need to do in order to create a sustainable society, which is the goal of United Nations. But sustainable society will not be able to evolve unless we resolve the question of, in my opinion, not only of energy and of the population growth. So as we're getting close to the end, I actually would like to have some last comments from both Kateryna for a minute and for Nusrat for a minute. And of course, thank very much Dr. Goldstein for being able to help us with his perspectives as usual. Kateryna?
Thank you so much for this floor. Thank you so much for this very interesting conversation. And I want to mention that it's very important what you do. And it's very important to inform society, inform the public, inform governments about issues is very important to mention already now. And without talks, without this floor, without conversation, we will never have solutions. So it is big decision and big impact of floors like yours. It's to discuss and make decisions. So thank you so much for this opportunity. And I'm looking forward to inform and to participate in near future with new technologies. I'm ready to inform about space technologies in nuclear, and looking forward for future discussions. Thank you.
And thank you, Kateryna. We certainly hope that you'll be able to be with us soon. And Nusrat, over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Durbach. I also completely agree that we need more discussions like this. People like us, the more we discuss, the more awareness we will raise. And this is one of the ways in which we can communicate the advantages and the good side of using an energy like nuclear energy in the proper manner, and how we can reap the most benefit out of it. And other than that, I'm conscious that we're running out of time, but then I remember that Ms. Kateryna mentioned to me earlier that last week they started this really interesting platform called Women in Nuclear. So Ms. Kateryna, would you like to spend like a few seconds to quickly share with our audience what it is about? Because I think it is very important that everybody knows about it, because it is also one of the ways in which we can continue the conversation on nuclear.
Women in Nuclear, it is world society supported by atomic energy and atomic energy, World Atomic Energy Agency, and Women in Nuclear, it is a big world cooperation society. And it is more than 100 countries participate. And last week we represent opening the office in Ukraine. And I do believe this Women in Nuclear office in Ukraine will mention us for more discussion in the field, and we will support gender equality in this field in Ukraine. And I also looking forward that you, Nusrat, learn more about this opportunity, and I looking forward to see you like ambassador in Middle East, like Women Nuclear partner and Women Nuclear type part of this society in your country.
Thank you very much. I look forward to it too.
Well, thank you very, very much, Kateryna and Nusrat and Bernie. And I am very, very pleased that you were able to join us and you were able to be with us. And I look forward to our next virtual voices, which you will have the announcement said, friend will send you the announcements. And in the meantime, have a wonderful week. Take good care of yourselves and stay healthy.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye. Bye.